Jesse. How are you?
I'm fine. How are you?
Okay, how's our level? How do we sound here? Leah, do you think we're okay in the back of the room? I think we're good. All right, we're good. All right,
Okay.
switch you up again now.
Thank you.
Great. And Hi, friends. Everyone got so quiet. You're all very well behaved.
Hello. Welcome, everybody. My name is Beth Greenberg, and I am here representing the Adult Education Committee's Book and Film Group. And tonight is a very special collaboration with the Mental Health Initiative, and we are very pleased to have Chris Gordon here representing that group as well. And we'll talk more about that later. I also want to welcome everybody on live stream. Thank you for joining us however you can. Tonight we are going to have a conversation and a little interview between Cantor Hollis and our esteemed guest, author Jessica Fein. We are so excited to have you here, and this is just a really special format, so we're very excited about this. And at the conclusion of the program, which will include questions from this group, questions from the live stream. By the way, if you're at home and you have a question you want to ask, you can email Leah at lstaffin, S-T-A-F-F-I-N, @sheertikva.org. So go ahead and do that, and we will make sure your questions get into the room as well. With that, I will turn it over to Cantor Hollis, who I believe needs no introduction.
Thank you so much, Beth. Thank you. And thank you, Jesse. So first, thank you. We sat for coffee in Saxonville, and you were telling me about the book, and my first thought was, can you please come and share this with our community, because you are such a deep and beloved part of this community already, and it is such a sublime honor to get to sit with you in this space and share this moment and your work and your story. So I know this is out there in the world, but I feel like there's a way in which there's a Sheer Tikva corner of it that feels really precious to all of us. So thank you for coming home and sharing it with us. I'm going to talk at you for a second about how much you mean to me, and then turn it over to you to share your thoughts with all of us. I just want you to know, Jesse, I read the book, and there were so many points at which I just had to put it down and laugh, and where I had to put it down and cry, and sometimes both at the same time. And what a privilege it was to have this history of our relationship where, as I'm reading it, I'm recognizing so many of these moments in it where it was an honor to be with you or have a front row seat to some of the events in it. And I want to also name that I loved hearing about your father as part of the book as well, because before I knew you, he was a hero. So for those of you who don't know, Jesse's father, who's mentioned throughout the book, is a hero in the Jewish world. When I was in my student pulpit before even coming to Sheer Tikva, he was one of the last speakers that we had at B'nai Israel of Woodbury, Connecticut, before I came up here. And when Jeff and I got married, we were committed to making donations to Mazon, a Jewish Response to Hunger, which is the organization your dad founded. So you may not know this, but on page 12 in the book, when it says that her dad had a plan to solve world hunger, that wasn't just rhetorical. He actually did.
He did.
And he made huge headroads towards that. So, larger than life, even before I knew you. And I remember moments like the call about Rachel's illness when we spoke, standing at Shuk HaPishpashim in Old Jaffa and talking by phone with you about that. And also there's so many shared simchas in this space with Jojo, with Theo's bar mitzvah just before COVID.
A little private affair.
Yeah, and the joy of seeing Theo at Eisner, where, it's his happy place too. And of course, Dahlia. So I hope I'm not the only one in this room who remembers Dahlia sitting right over there at services in the front row. That was her seat. And she just loved music so much. And I also remember visiting at Mass General when you were wrestling with the decision that you wrote about in the book about her trach. And at the time, in the book, reading about how you were wrestling with this decision, but at the time, Dahlia just wanted to get down on the floor and play with bowling pins with me, and she was super competitive, and so it was just this wonderful moment of bonding with this treasured, beautiful soul. While until reading the book, I really didn't have a sense of how deep the decisions were that you were making at the time. And of course, her bar mitzvah, which we'll hear much more about And being with all of you at the end of her life was one of the most painful, holy honors of my life, being able to be of what comfort and service you allowed me to be in that moment was humbling and meaningful beyond measure. So I wanted to open, as I mentioned to you, with sharing some words about Dahlia that we shared at her funeral, because it's important to have a picture not only from the book, but I think also in this space of who she was to us. So I have so many powerful memories of Dahlia lighting up the room and making my day just by making her entrance on Friday nights during our Kabbalat Shabbat services. Her eyes would get huge, and she would sort of levitate a little bit with excitement, and nothing made Rabbi Jen Gubitz and me happier than bringing a drum over or a shaker for her to play so she could help front the Shabbat band. And the best was how much she loved the guitar. So Rabbi Jen or I would form the chords with one hand, and we would take her hand with the other so she could strum. And she would just be right up there with us in front, showing the whole congregation how it was done, and singing hallelujah and offering praises to God with this sheer unadulterated glow of sharing Shabbat and music and family and warmth and abundant, overflowing love. And she was, as you said again and again in the book, a sassy, feisty teenager, and at the same time, this beautiful, beautiful soul, just as in those words of Lachilach, as true and prescient as they were from her from the very beginning. She was such a blessing to all of us. So with that, I thank you for sharing her. And a little bit about Jessie. Jessica Fein is the author of Breathtaking, a memoir of family, dreams, and broken genes, and host of the I Don't Know How You Do It podcast, which features people whose lives seem unimaginable and who triumph over seemingly impossible challenges. Her writing has appeared in Newsweek, Psychology Today, The Boston Globe, HuffPost, Scary Mommy, Feller, and more. Her work encompasses hope and humor, grit and grace, the tools that make up her personal survival kit. Jessica serves on the board of directors of Mito Action. She lives with her husband, Rob, and I'm happy you're here with us, and children outside of Boston with their quasi-service dog who trained himself. And with that, I give you Jessie.
Well, wow. Thank you. And I have to say, it is so special to be not only with you, but in this space that holds such precious memories for us. And Dahlia, as you mentioned, she had such a connection to you and to Rabbi Gubitz. And we'd come in and she would, at that point she wasn't speaking, but she would mouth and she'd say, "Is my friend going to be there?" Because she called you both my friend. And she loved coming, as you say, and being part of it. And that was such magic. In so many places we went, she felt other. She couldn't participate. People were looking at her. And here, she was just fundamental to what was happening. And so much of that was from the way you brought her in. And therefore, she could give that back. And it was just this gorgeous, gorgeous friendship. And we're just forever grateful to you and to the community for giving us this space and this experience and these memories that nourish us still. So thank you.
Absolutely. I'm excited to have you share from your book and some readings. You mentioned that you wanted to reflect back on the passage about her bar mitzvah here, which in the now 23 years I've been here, there have been so many sublime and joyful moments, but nothing is frozen in my mind as a picture of greater happiness in this building or this space than dancing with her in the social hall filled with dahlias. The room was transformed. You mentioned it made a Willy Wonka comment earlier. It was like walking in like bright technicolor of dahlias everywhere, flowers everywhere, and Dahlia just whirling in joy. And I'd love to hear you reflect more on that.
And what was so special about that, too, is that the height of the dahlias was all measured to her eye level in her chair. So that for her, it was really just all right there, like she was immersed. But I wanted to read, and what's interesting is that when we talk about the memoir and we talk about kind of my journey and my transformation, the bat mitzvah experience was core to how I grew and how I evolved. And you'll hear about that. I will say no more, I will read. Chapter is called What She Can Do. In our synagogue, dates for bar and bat mitzvah ceremonies are assigned years in advance, way before your child has stopped squirming in the pews or surreptitiously putting their iPad inside the prayer book during services. You know the exact date your child will become an adult, at least in the eyes of the Jewish world, while they're just getting braces and mastering math facts. We'd known Dahlia's bat mitzvah date for years, but now that the date was approaching, we were more than a little ambivalent. There were practical concerns, of course. Dahlia could no longer speak or read, both crucial skills to saying a blessing over and chanting from the Torah. We also had to consider her extreme fatigue. A 2-hour service followed by an even longer party would definitely result in a major energy crash. But then we remembered how worried we were years before when planning Jonah's bar mitzvah. We'd figured Dahlia would be exhausted and had hired a nurse and an aide to take her home early. As it crept toward the agreed-upon time of her exit, Rob and I watched Dahlia in the center of the dance floor. There she was, beaming from her chair, holding the hands of family members and friends who'd crowded around her, each waiting for a turn to spin and twirl with our seated beauty, who was radiating so much joy. We gave the nurse and the aide the rest of the night off and went to join Dahlia on the dance floor. I might have felt a little bad for Jonah, since Dahlia was clearly the center of attention, and it was, after all, his event, but he was too busy trying to sneak a kiss from Eliana in the photo booth to notice. How could we take another chance for so much happiness away from our daughter? And for that matter, we didn't want to deprive her of the opportunity she so deserved, the chance to take her rightful place in our community. Dahlia would never learn Hebrew, never go to overnight camp or sing Jewish songs, or learn even a single Israeli dance. Yet every time we went to services, Dahlia insisted we sit in the front row so she could hear the music clearly, clap her hands, and let loose with her shoulder dance. Her quiet participation in the music emanating from the bima could rival the loudest gospel choir. There was also what it meant to me. I could still sing my own bat mitzvah portion by heart. I remembered that when my friend Dana's mother saw me shaking before my own service, she did some deep breathing exercises with me to calm me down. I still had the bracelet my mother gave me and the tiny prayer book gifted to me by the synagogue. Dahlia's childhood looked nothing like mine. I wanted one day of overlap, and I wanted the cocktail of nostalgia and pride I'd consumed at Jonah's bar mitzvah. On top of all that, there was the matter of our boys. Depriving Dahlia of a bat mitzvah would have sent them a loud message that Dahlia wasn't equipped for or deserving of the same rites of passage they were entitled to. It would be yet another reminder of her difference, rather than a reassurance of her more important sameness. We scheduled a meeting with a member of the synagogue clergy, Cantor Hollis, to help us think through if and how to give Dahlia a bat mitzvah. Cantor Hollis is one of those people who always makes you feel a little bit better about yourself and about the world for having someone like her in it. When she sings, you understand that if you believed in angels, and if you thought those angels were in the business of singing, this is what their voices would sound like. What should we do, I asked her. How can Dahlia have a bat mitzvah when she can't read or speak and might not even be able to understand what's going on? We did not want to make her a spectacle in any way. I hear you, Cantor Hollis began. Let's think about what Dahlia can do as our starting point, rather than focusing on what she can't. Dahlia couldn't chant Torah, but she could push a button on an iPad. Cantor Hollis told us about a program called Gateways that provides Jewish education to kids with all kinds of abilities. We signed up, and every Sunday, Dahlia and I spent the morning in a small classroom with other young teens, some in wheelchairs and diapers, some who were silent like Dahlia, some who could speak, and others who verbalized in their own unique way. The kids had varying cognitive and physical abilities, but they had one thing in common. Every one of them was preparing for an upcoming bar or bat mitzvah ceremony. The teacher, a woman named Rebecca, sat with Dahlia week after week and sang the prayers to her. And on the day of Dahlia's bat mitzvah, when Dahlia pushed the button on her iPad in time for each prayer and reading of a Torah passage, it would be Rebecca's voice that rang out through the sanctuary. And that wasn't all. Dahlia couldn't write a commentary on the weekly Torah reading, but she could sit with Rob as he wrote one, and she could hold his hand while he read it to the congregation. Dahlia couldn't carry the Torah around the perimeter of the synagogue, but Jonah could, and Theo could push Dahlia in her wheelchair beside Jonah as he did so. And there was the most important thing Dahlia could do. She was more than capable of celebrating, of joyously being seen as a full member of her community. Once we decided to throw ourselves into preparing for the bat mitzvah, there was no way I was going to miss the opportunity to make it the most gloriously magical thing Dahlia had ever experienced. The decorative motif was obvious. We'd transformed the blank canvas of a party room into a bursting field of dahlia flowers. I worked with my friend Susan to envision an obscene abundance of pink and purple dahlias made of construction paper and measured to the exact height of Dahlia's sightline from her wheelchair. A little bit Oz-like, maybe a bit Dr. Seuss-esque, but utterly Dahlia too. Mm-hmm. The most important thing Cantor Hollis told us is that we find a way to meet Dahlia where she was so she could have a bat mitzvah that was meaningful to her and honored who she is. And so that's what we prepared to do. We learned yet again that honoring what Dahlia could do was worlds more important than grieving what she couldn't. One day, more than likely, there'd be time for that grieving. But that time wasn't now, and we weren't going to waste a minute of her life grieving prematurely.
What's it like reading that and being here on this bima again, where this all unfolded?
It's really surreal and feels so different from the opportunity I've had to share passages of the book in other places where people didn't know Dahlia, where I told Cantor Hollis she's got a fan club she doesn't even know about now, because people are like, tell me about the Cantor, But I have had I've spoken with a few Jewish groups who have wanted specifically to hear that part of the book. It's wonderful to be able to share, but it feels just so right to be in this space, and I can just picture, I mean, I feel Dahlia, not to get too woo-woo, but I feel Dahlia and the joy and the presence and the music and being with you and, this little meta reading about you to you and, but...
Totally. I mean, it's a little bit of a time collapse.
Yeah.
Because as you're reading that, I'm picturing sitting up in my office with you, having that conversation, and both of us were sort of like wide-eyed, like, okay, how are we going to do this? But it was very clear we were going to do this.
We were going to do this, and you made that clear. You helped me see we can do this, and it can be just what it needs to be, what it wants to be. It can be something that honors Dahlia in just a perfect way, instead of trying to take Dahlia and put her into, well, this is exactly how everybody does it, and you opened my eyes to that possibility.
I'm going to set aside how surreal it is to have words written about me that are read to me in a book. that there's a whole thing that's super surreal, so I will take you for coffee and do private thank yous around that. But I'm going to just name that here because that was, again, powerful and humbling beyond pretty much any other experience of my life. So thank you for that and for what you said, and that was a moment where I had to close the book and just cry. But I think a lot about how we sing with our kids in our Hineni program. We sing Dan Nichols' Asher Yatzar, a song of, the prayer for gratitude for bodies that work at least well enough for us to gather. And he has this line in it, I'm perfect the way I am, and a little broken too. And as I was reading your book, those words kept coming to me. And that moment on the bima with Dahlia at her bar mitzvah was perfect the way it was, with a little brokenness too, and how the dominant feeling in all of that was sublime joy.
Sublime joy.
There wasn't any focus on what she couldn't do that day at all. That part was just out the window. It was just perfect the way it was, and any measure of brokenness in it was not the focus of the day in the slightest. It was just the joy and beauty. So you gave us a gift that day by enabling us to share in that moment. And so speaking of time collapsing, that's the end of the story. The way that you wrote it culminated in that moment of joy. But
can I just say, actually, the book ended originally,
Yeah.
not at that scene, but a couple of chapters later, there's a scene where we're dancing with Dahlia and we're spinning in the synagogue and we're looking up at the ceiling, and this is what life is, joy and sorrow dancing together. And that was where the book ended, actually, when it was originally, when I had my agent and the publisher and everything else. And then Dahlia died while we were in that process. This was never meant to be a book, and is not a book about our daughter dying. This is about her life. And so it was very much, that was the culminating scene, was the joy of that. And then we had the epilogue.
I felt that very deeply in reading it, and I
Yeah.
remember you mentioning that. And going back to the beginning of her life, if we
Yes.
kind of go back to the early seeds of the story that were planted at the beginning, you wrote that you didn't know of her health challenges before adopting her. So I'd love to hear more about all of that.
Yeah. So, it's interesting. I don't know if people here have gone through adoptions, but when you're adopting, there's first of all, you have to pass tests. They come out to make sure your house is, pristine, and you have to fill out reams of paperwork, and there's just, everything under the sun. It's quite, as it should be. I mean, maybe some of it's a little over the top. But one of the things that we had to do was to fill out paperwork that asked us what we would be open to. I don't remember the exact wording, but essentially what kinds of conditions we would be open to. And it starts off with, kind of minor things, and it goes all the way, because they want to, of course, match you with a child who, meets what you are prepared for. And we had some conversations about that, and it was clear to me that I didn't want any of it. Because here we had gone on a 5-year journey to get to the point where we were going to adopt, and now we were embracing and excited and just couldn't believe what an amazing turn our journey was taking. And we were all in and loved it, and never thought about it as kind of a second option. It was almost like, God, why didn't we think of this 5 years ago, But I was at this point, I didn't want to sign up for anything that was going to be extra challenging, I will embarrass Rob a little bit. He didn't feel the same way. He was I'm up for anything. But in any event, so we checked off that we weren't interested in the lengthy list of possibilities. So what's interesting is we did not know, obviously, and when Dahlia was diagnosed 5 years later, my first reaction, and it's funny, you mentioned my father and I were in the lobby of the hospital afterwards. We had taken separate cars, Rob had already left, and I said to my father, and he often reminded me of this, I'm just glad we didn't know. Because had we known, had we been told, there's a newborn girl and she's got this insidious, horrible degenerative disease, or even if we had been told she had something less tragic, I would have said, well, we'll wait for the next child. I would not have raised my hand. And I point that out in the book for a couple of reasons. Number one, thank God, because it was so clear that this was the child meant for us, and we were the parents meant for her, and thank God we didn't know, so we could find our rightful place together. But also because, a lot of people we would meet would assume, look, they adopted this child. Dahlia didn't look like us. She was from Guatemala, as all of our children are. So, it was pretty clear. Some people thought we looked alike, which I always thought was a huge compliment to me. But, that we had adopted her, and I wanted to disassociate myself from the idea that we had voluntarily taken this on, because I think there are many people who do take on situations like this, and that's tremendous. I didn't want any kind of adulation, that is a strong word, but any kind of, people thinking, oh, look at what this, that felt very uncomfortable because it wasn't true. But like I said, we were meant for each other, all of us as a family, and so.
And that was clear, seeing all of you together. You focus a lot on the need to do more than survive in your book and to really thrive and find joy in life. And I find myself thinking that about you. When my overwhelming impression of you has always been that you present first with ebullience, like light and joy and humor. You're one of the funniest people I know.
Thank you.
So you bring that lightness into everything you do. And Brene Brown, I don't know if you're a Brene Brown
Of
fan,
course.
right? So she's now my second favorite writer. I'm a big fan, but you know how she's talked about foreboding joy? I don't know if you've read her section on foreboding joy, which is this instinct in a moment of absolute happiness to withdraw into some kind of like waking dark nightmare, to armor yourself with some protection to ward off loss instead of letting yourself experience the joy. And that felt very familiar to me. And I was thinking about that as I was reading this. How were you and your family able to stay present for joy with Dahlia? And today, when the shoe in your life has already dropped, as we've read in the book multiple times, how do you stay present for joy?
I love that. I love that question. Thank you. So first of all, I will say watching Dahlia and learning from Dahlia was the easiest way in the world to do that, because here you have a human who has every reason in the world to be angry, to be scared, to be bitter. And she exuded joy, and she just wanted to be a kid and have fun. And so there was a big part of me that says, well, if she is ready to, use the saline bullets that are supposed to loosen the plug in the trach to have water fights, and if she wants to, shoulder dance around Target or race in the wheelchair with her brother, who am I to sit around and be bitter and angry and I have to conduct, and Rob, we have to conduct this life for all of us, right? And to be able to give back what she so clearly wanted. But it's interesting what you say about like, well, maybe I shouldn't be too happy, because if I'm too happy, then bad things will happen and I have to have that. And I do write about this. I was very taken off guard out of the blue when I was 27 and my sister Nomi died. So that was the first major loss, and the loss that broke me and undid me and changed me forever. So after that, I thought it would be good to imagine that other people were going to die. That way I'd be prepared, because I wasn't prepared when Nomi died. I don't recommend this. So it doesn't work. So, I would try and think, well, what would it be like, And my mother died when she never met Theo. She never knew Dahlia was sick. She knew and loved Dahlia, but she died before the diagnosis. But in any event, I imagined it, so that I'd be prepared and that I wouldn't let myself be too happy. And then when she died, I realized that imagining the worst thing does not make you any more prepared when the worst thing happens. So you may as well just leave it aside. See the point in that. I don't see, first of all, look, some people have more of a natural disposition toward the fetal position, I suppose, but I don't see the point, and I don't consciously sit around and think, well, what would they want me to do? But I think that that's part of it. Like, I'm here, and the roulette wheel has stopped a lot in my family on different people, and I am here to, as part of my mission is to be able to share their stories, share their life, share what they taught me. And that's one of the reasons that I wrote the book, and that I'm so glad to have the opportunity to talk about the book and to talk about my people.
That's really helpful, actually, to think about it in that framing. And my husband, who's a hospice chaplain, sometimes talks about the idea of trying to rehearse grief.
Yes.
Right? And that, in your various relationships where you've unfortunately had too many different experiences of grief, they're all so different, but the way that foundationally that first experience with Nomi formed the sort of basis for how your worldview was altered from there going forward. And that makes me think of the partner of grief that dances with fear a little bit. And so you write about the difference between living in fear and living with fear. So I'd love to know more about that.
Yeah, this was really interesting during COVID, because we had been living a certain way for a long time, right? And now during COVID, people could kind of get it. We're like, welcome, this is what this is what it's like. And a lot of people were consumed at that point. I mean, we all, we didn't know what was happening, and so you could live in fear, right? But what I talk about when I write about this particular thing is that what that does is it takes a lot of energy. If you're going to live in something, right, you're spending all your time kind of worrying about it and protecting against into it, and it's just like, it takes a lot of energy. Sure. And it becomes all consuming. Now, there are, during COVID or in our life, were real things to be frightened of. There was real fear. But living with fear is different than living in fear, because now you can say, yes, I'm scared. And sometimes I am going to curl up in the corner, but when I do it, I'm going to have a cozy blanket and twinkly lights and a good book, because we're going to be here together, me and the fear. It's the same as to a certain extent, the anxiety around this stuff. Yes, it's going to be there, and let's recognize it. Let's name it. Naming it is a huge thing. Takes away some of the power. And then we're going to carry on together, me and the fear, or me and the, whatever the thing is, because we don't want to pretend that it doesn't exist, but nor do we want to let it consume us.
That's really instructive, because it's sort of like having to make friends with fear.
Exactly. It's
bit.
like, yes, right. And it's like, okay, we're going to be here together, but I'm going to be in charge.
Right. It's interesting, because I think about Theo's bar mitzvah, and how, so Theo's bar mitzvah was the last bar mitzvah before the COVID shutdown. And, the decisions that had to go into making that and making it as safe as possible. And that was when there were still all these questions about how this thing was transmitted and what distances we need to be, and, wanting Dahlia to be there and make that safe as it could be. And so there was clearly fear involved in the planning of that. But I think that's a model in my mind for here. We did everything we could in this unknowable circumstance to allow for as much safety as possible. And then you have to just sit with the rest of it.
Yes, and fun fact about Theo's bar mitzvah, I mean, it was really at the very beginning. So it was, do we cancel? And we were like, well, cancel? That seems so alarmist, And the caterer kept calling us and saying, well, you got to make some decisions. Are you going to do it? And we said, it was like Wednesday before, and we said, yes, we're going to do it. Go for it. So, and then we had to cancel the party, and we had just a few people here for the ceremony. We had all the food. We had food for like 200 people. We were the most well-fed family during COVID. We were eating, like little souffles and peach puffs and like all this fancy schmancy food that fed us all through COVID. It was great. And the cookies, we had like these big Theo. We had ordered 150 big Theo cookies. We ate them for months.
Well, maybe that actually answered my next question, which is, you had a full-time job throughout this entire time period, and Rob also had a full-time job. So since you didn't have to cook, since you had all of the food,
yes.
But seriously, how did you manage all of that? And then you wrote this book about it.
Yeah, and I thank you for asking that, because one of the things I do write about a little bit is that I think for women in general, right, we get judged whatever decisions we make, but I think that there was a time that I write about where I was very specifically judged for choosing to continue to work. And for me, that was very, very important. I believe that I was able to be more present at home because I worked, I was out of the house, I had time when I was the person, the me that I was before all this, the me that I would be after. And so it was very, very important for me. It was logistically complicated, and we did have terrific help. We also had some very kooky help. Read about that too. Yeah. And then, Dahlia spent a lot of time resting, and I wrote a lot of the book at her bedside. Dahlia was what's called an eyes-on patient, meaning Rob or myself or a nurse trained specifically in her care had to be watching her 24/7. So there was that time. And then there's another thing. This is a great tactic that I advise, because the couple we learned this from had one child who was healthy. And they told us one night that they do this thing where they would give each other a night off during the week. And we looked at each other, we're like, oh my God, why haven't we been doing this? And so then we started, so like Tuesday night would be my night, Thursday night would be Rob's night. And knowing all week that I was going to have this night that was going to be mine to do whatever I wanted. And I did write a lot, or I'd see a friend, or I'd go to a movie, whatever it was. But scheduling in some time where you're away from all the other stuff was really, really helpful as well.
That leads into a related question about how you and Rob managed this together as a couple. According to Psychology Today, about 87% of parents with a child with a disability end up getting divorced.
Yeah.
And so it sounds like you've started to address some of the ways in which you and Rob took good care of yourselves, but how did you guys navigate that together in your marriage?
So, and I can absolutely see why. I think that it either breaks you or makes you unbreakable, right? Because it's so hard. Rob and I'm wondering how you would answer this question, but have very complementary skills and are so different. So, first of all, I will say that and which you've witnessed, so you can back me up, but the connection between Rob and Dahlia is the single most beautiful human connection and relationship I've ever had the privilege of witnessing. And Rob became very, very skilled at some of the technical medical care, and but on the other hand, I'm sure he doesn't know the name of our nursing organization. So, we each had our things that we did. I think we were also really respectful of trying to understand where the other was emotionally at any moment in time. And what I mean by that is it's an odd thing when there's only one other person in the world who can really understand what it is that you're going through, and yet you want to protect that person too. So if one of us was in a place where, we were in the heavy place, we wouldn't just go dump. We would say, are you in a place where it's okay to talk about this right now? Because otherwise, if one person's feeling we're sitting here cuddled and reading Amelia Bedelia, and I come in and I'm so rather to check in with the other and see if this is an okay time to kind of go there. And then I think also, we were together a long time before this, and we had been through a lot. We had been through the loss of my sister. We had been through a very lengthy fertility journey. We had been through some stuff. If this happened to newlyweds, it might be a different case.
It was very clear reading the book, and also from the sidelines of having the privilege of seeing what a team you guys were, that you took such incredible care of Dahlia and of each other, and it was astounding just to watch and to read about it from the inside and hear your insight on that now. Just doubles down on that conviction. And in addition to supporting each other, you have a big community of people who wanted to support you. And we all know that well-intentioned people can bungle it a lot. And so you offer advice for people who aren't going through something like this themselves, but want to be able to show up to support a friend who's having a hard time. Best practices for those of us who want to help people going through hard, rough times. Yeah,
and whatever I'm going to say is also the same in grief, and it's something that I've written quite a bit about, and have a lot of experience with people who have really gotten it right and what that looks like. And I think, specifically when we're talking about grief or when we're talking about something that's so unusual as what we were going through, and Dahlia was one of 6 in the world with this dual diagnosis. So, it doesn't have to be that, but in terms of we're uncomfortable. And this is so true in grief, which it always boggles my mind because grief is the one thing we know we're all going to experience. It's totally universal. We're so uncomfortable. And so we sometimes don't even show up at all, or we kind of bumble it. And I think that, first of all, it is okay to say, hey, I don't know what to say. That is fine. I'd much rather say, I don't know. Hear somebody say, I don't know what to say. I'm here. I don't have the right words, but I want you to know I'm here. I'm with you. I love you, or I care for you, or whatever. So I think acknowledging it rather than trying to, all the platitudes. I think also so many of us, and I know this is my natural inclination, we want to fix it. Whatever it is, we're I'm going to fix it. And by the way, I was going to fix this disease. I believed I would cure it. I would find a cure. And I'm not in the medical field or anything like that. So I did not know what mitochondria were when she was diagnosed. And I was I'm going to solve it, But we're comfortable like that, especially, genderist, I was going to say especially a lot of women, but, that I can fix this. And there's sometimes that's not, people don't need you to come in and try to fix it. They need you, to acknowledge, this is awful. Like, this is terrible. And they need you to be with them in that horrible place, to say, this is terrible, and you are not alone. I am here. Okay. And then another thing is, often we'll say, if you need anything, please let me know. Okay, so you know what? I don't want to have to take on what you might mean by that and think about, here's what you could do, right? So an alternative to that is to say, there's a lot of alternatives. One thing is to just do, to note that I have a dog, you have a dog. How about if I'm going to come walk your dog? Or here's a menu of 8 things that I would love to do for you, and just, check off whatever would be useful. There's just so many ways you can do it, but what you don't want to do is be putting any more pressure or giving the person on the receiving end anything else they have to do.
Right. I think that's really useful, the don't ask,
Yeah.
but just show up.
Just show up.
Just show up. Either show up and be quiet or show up with help.
Yeah.
But don't wait to be told.
Right.
Don't wait to be instructed. That's really helpful. I think, again, also about what you said about, I don't know what to say. And I was curious about that for a little bit about you and Rob as parents, actually. There was that chapter where you quoted Dahlia saying, Mama, why my legs no work like they're supposed to? And you had this answer, this beautiful answer, different bodies work in different ways, and you referenced Jonah's glasses. Or I was thinking about the scene where she was unable to eat the potato chips after her trach. What that brought up for me, when my daughter Liat, who really remembers Dahlia made a strong impression on Liat, and when she knew that I was going to be, she saw the book, and she knew I was going to be coming here and speaking with you, and she'd always loved seeing Dahlia at services. So when she heard I was interviewing you, she asked me if I knew how you talked to Dahlia about her own medical journey. As a parent, I kind of resonated with that question because I think it's always tricky to know just how much information to give to kids. There's that whole thing about just answer the question asked.
Yeah.
Right? And in that, Mama, why my legs no work? You did. Different bodies, different work in different ways. Don't add too many details. But I was curious how, in age-appropriate ways, did you and Rob discuss Dahlia's diagnosis with her, or prepare her for what to expect, or what support you and Rob might have had from her care team in thinking about how to communicate what was going on to her and how to craft the messages that you gave her about her changing situation?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I would say 3 things. Number one, there are people, as you just alluded to, who are expert in this, right? So whether that's the social worker at the hospital, the palliative care team, whoever it is, who really are experts in developmentally, this is some language you might want to use, etc. Number 2, for the first thing was the hearing aids, and so we were looking for books about kids with hearing aids. Or when she got her G-tube, which is a feeding tube in the belly, there was a stuffed animal that they had in the hospital that we could show. So these kids' books, and a friend of mine right now actually is working on that very thing for some other conditions, to try to have both stuffed animals and accompanying books. And that's not only for the person who's going through it, but it's good for the siblings. And then the third thing I'll say is sometimes as parents, we worry way more about how the child is going to take something on. And so what I mean by that is, when we found out that Dahlia was going to need hearing aids, which was pre-diagnosis of the Murph syndrome, I thought this was the most horrible thing in the whole world. Okay, which is mortifying at this point in time. And I think of hearing aids as, an accessory that, right. And I remember, how in the world, what are we going to do? How are we going to tell her, and I was calling my friends and, all kinds of different advice. Well, when Dahlia, the first time that she got the hearing aids, she was overjoyed. She could hear, you know? And here we had wasted so much time and energy worrying about how we were going to let her know that she was going to be having these things. And she got like a purple sparkly pair. They were super cool, you know? So I think sometimes we take on so much instead of thinking about what the impact might be.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I want to ask you one more question, and then I want to make sure we save time because I'm sure there are lots of questions here. And people on the live stream, if you're watching at home, I believe that Leah Staffen, our Director of Community Engagement, put her email address in there so you can send questions if you'd like to participate from home. But the question I want to ask you, going back to where we are right now, your story is so Jewish. And so I'm curious if you could say a little bit more about the role that your Jewish identity, which does permeate the whole book, but in this space, if there's more for you to say or more you wanted to share about the way that your Jewish community, the role, your Jewish identity, your deeply Jewish upbringing impacted you through this journey. And I'm thinking specifically about what Judaism had to offer you as tools to deal with this.
Right.
And maybe even how your relationship with Judaism changed over the course of this journey.
It's funny, I'm laughing because I met somebody today who runs something called Matzo Ball Books. I don't know if anybody knows about it. I had never heard of it. And she said they are covering Jewish books. And I said, I was so happy to meet her. And she kept like saying, no, she didn't understand that my book was a Jewish book. And I was like, no. We're having this back and forth of just like, maybe read it and then we could talk about it. I grew up with Tevi. We went to Solomon Schechter, and I feel like, from, as you said, I grew up in, it was just my Judaism was core to who I am as a human being. That is the context in which I learned what it means to be human. It is so intrinsic, so I've never had to question it. It's just who I am. I'm not particularly religious, right? And this didn't change that for me in terms of my religiosity, one way or the other. But I find, first of all, having a place when we talk about, Shir Tikva is a character in the book, but having a place where, it is just total acceptance meant a lot to me. Music means a lot in that. And I cannot sing. So it's like, it's like I'm in such awe, but listening to music. And so that would be something that I would do, and that would bring me huge comfort. And then I think, we'd been through a lot, and the texture of how we got through everything. And so we're talking a lot about a lot of loss, but I lost 3 parents, 2 siblings and my daughter. And I think that through loss, the community has been so important to me. And we talk a lot, we were just talking about the community coming together in times of joy, but I think what the community has to offer in times of hardship and loss, that really was very powerful for both Rob and me when, from that first loss, and I think that kind of imprinted and then was something that just got stronger as time went on.
I'm so glad that Shir Tikva got to be a character in your book, and more importantly, that we were of service to you in your story, and that your lives were such a part and are such a part of the fabric of our community. We just feel, I'm speaking for myself and for us, so blessed, just on every level, so blessed. So with that, I want to make sure we have a chance to open the floor for some other questions in the space.
If you would just say your name and speak clearly, that way the people at home.
My name is Peter Hill. How did your other children react to dealing with the loss of their sibling?
Yeah, so, I think that the journey has been very different for each of the 4 of us, and different still for the 2 of them. Dahlia was our middle child, and so our eldest was, I think, more aware of the changes as they were happening. Our youngest was a little bit more of the kind of nature of his life, though, his earlier memories, she was healthy. But I would say that the two of them are caring, empathic, open, kind, and I think that they may have had all those traits anyway, but for sure they're magnified because they are Dahlia's siblings, and they both are kind of caregivers at heart. Our eldest became an EMT, our youngest talks about wanting to be a firefighter, and so, I don't think that's an accident.
Hi, I'm Mark Selliver. Thank you so much for being able to write that book. Actually, my questions are also about your sons. I'm just wondering what Jonah and Theo are doing these days.
Yeah, so our youngest, Theo, is a junior in high school and is right now at a baseball game. And our eldest is right now working as we speak, is at the pet store. So working. So that's what they're doing now.
I don't think I need that. I want to compliment you. I think that your speaking is as eloquent as your book. And
Thank
I
you.
compliment you on that. You've been delightful.
Thank you so much.
Leah, I saw your hand.
Okay, that's gonna break me.
Lois, you come sit in my office, I'll sing it to you. We'll catch up.
Hi, I'm Leah, and I'm asking for Jill, who's participating online, about the decision of having to change schools and how it felt when Dahlia was so happy in a new school.
Well, I call that the best decision I never made, because Dahlia was the public schools at Framingham, and so Dahlia's medical condition changed dramatically when she was 9. For those of you who read the book, that's when she had her tracheostomy and when she lost the ability to walk and talk and was ventilator dependent. But we really were happy with her in the public schools, and we sent her with a private nurse, and we felt that this is something she should be able to continue to do. And the school system didn't agree. They felt that they couldn't keep her safe. We felt like we're keeping her safe by sending, And so they wanted us to go and look at all these special schools, and one was more kind of distressing to us than the next, because we were still thinking of Dahlia in this very mainstream way, and it was hard to see some of the schools. And then what happened was we ended up contesting it, and we went in to meet with a mediator, and she said to us, "You realize most parents go to trial with schools to try to get the school system to send their kids to a special private school. No judge is going to say the school believes your child needs to be elsewhere and is ready to pay $70,000 a year to send her to a special school." And you can take it to trial, but you will lose. And I still wanted to fight it. We had a couple days of mediation, and it was really backwards for them. I mean, we were coming from a very different place than they were accustomed to. And ultimately, we ended up going to the Kennedy Day School, which is part of, on the grounds of Franciscan's Hospital in Brighton. And it was absolutely fabulous. The school system was entirely correct in recommending that she go there. And as Dahlia's condition progressed, which is such a crazy word, to use in this case, but they were able to continue to honor what she could do rather than what she couldn't. And it was a really, really special place, and that's why I say it's the best decision I never made.
Charmaine, I see.
So I thought the book was amazing. And one of the things, so there were two things, and they were sort of the same. One was how you sort of came to the realization through the medical community that Dahlia would be calling the shots. Her body would inform you. about what the next steps were. And all the way through the book, there was such an emphasis on what Dahlia taught you.
Yes.
And it wasn't just through her body. And I thought that was beautiful. It wasn't your story as much as it was the influence of Dahlia.
Yes. Thank you for saying that. And 100%, it was a doctor who said to me one night in the middle of the night when we were waiting for some test results in the hospital, Dahlia's going to tell you what she wants. And I thought, what are you talking about? Dahlia's going to tell you. She was like, at the time, heavily sedated. And she said, if you just are quiet and listen, sure, she'll tell you. Her body will tell you. And actually, it's something that we ended up using for our other children as well. And it's been very, very valuable. That sometimes, particularly when they were younger, their behaviors were their way of telling us what they needed. And so I thought that was really profound advice that doctor gave us. And yes, there's a lot to be learned from Dahlia. And that's why one of the reasons why I'm so gratified when people read the book and they'll say, I feel like I got to know Dahlia, right? That makes me really happy. Because everybody should get to know Dahlia.
Absolutely. I just want to also reflect on that as a parent, I really, that's great parenting instruction,
Right?
actually, because so many times, and I think about the school as well, we think we know, and we're so sure we know, and we're so positive we're right, and yet the little humans in front of us are telling us a different story, and how hard it can be to just stop and listen to what they're actually telling us, whether it was Dahlia through her medical condition, or as you mentioned with your other kids. Like that's the willingness to be wrong, and to learn from that is actually profound and really helpful. Yeah.
Let me note that in the book and in the times that I've listened to you speak, you have spoken of how Dahlia's joie de vivre lights up her life, lights you up, keeps Tio and Jojo going. I need to observe that this is a reflection of you and Rob as well.
Oh.
You bring this to the table.
Thank you.
Truth.
Thank you.
A fan.
It's hard to summarize all my thoughts about this. I read this in the last 2 days. I was so moved, and
Thank you.
I'm just going to say which parts were particularly emotional when Jonah comes into your room. That's when I had to put it down and cry. And he's so distraught, and you are unaware of what I love so much. So many times in the book, you acknowledge you didn't do it perfectly. And I think that's really helpful for all parents. The other thing was when you were making that decision on the trach, and your friend said, "Don't worry, she'll come through. She'll still be herself."
Yeah.
That was the other time I had to put it down. That was just a beautiful, perfect thing to say. And it seemed like you were able to take that thought in. And obviously from everything, I remember Dahlia, but I didn't really know her. But from everything that you two are saying, it was absolutely true.
Yeah. Yeah.
So thank you.
Thank you.
I think what others have said reflects very much my own sense too. I was just so terribly moved by this. I thought it was such a wonderfully generous thing to write this book. And one observation I would share is that so much of the time when people are confronted with terrible medical circumstances, they feel like they're alone. And alone in a world where there are no guideposts. And even though many people will not be experiencing the same very, very rare challenge that Dahlia and your family faced, the way you faced it together, the way you loved each other and lifted each other up, I'm sure is going to be inspirational and deeply comforting to people with many, many other challenges.
Thank you.
So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for saying that.
Are there any other questions from people watching, Leah, on the live stream? Anything else? Dear?
Betsy Huntley. I'm wondering what your boys think of the book.
Well, it's an excellent question. So they're very supportive of this whole, like, you know, they're excited. They came, I had a signing at Barnes & Noble. They came to that one, but they haven't read it yet. There are a bazillion copies all over. They can pick it up, and when they're ready, they will. I will say, since we started by talking about my father wrote a book about, he wrote many books. One of the books was about his experience of my sister's death. And my other sister and I responded very differently from each other. We had very different reactions to it. But we were older, and I think when they're ready, they will read it. There were a couple of things that I asked, so Jonah, we go by Jojo, that I asked Jojo about before I put it in the book. I mean, I was very careful about not telling their stories. That's theirs to tell. But where I felt it was important for what I was trying to share, I did get permission.
Related to that, by way of just looking at the time and starting to head towards wrapping up, because I could sit here all night and keep asking a lot more questions. Related to that last question, it's such an intimate book, and it's such a deep inner life sharing of your experience, and again, of Jojo and Theo's experiences, Rob's experiences, Dahlia's experiences. Were there any reservations about putting so much intimacy out into the world, and were there any unexpected responses that you got to that?
I did not have any reservations, but I did get feedback from a number of early readers who don't know us, so like the editor and, that I portrayed Rob as, quote, Saint Rob. So multiple people said that. They were like, you got to bring him down a couple of notches, So, that was, and I felt that was a very honest portrayal of him, so I didn't have a problem. I thought that was, but, so I did make him a little more nuanced in the book, but I didn't, and I wonder sometimes if perhaps I had a little bit more freedom because my family of origin is gone, so I didn't. But I believe they'd be proud if they saw how they were portrayed. I don't think that there's anything that, I feel I was very honest. It's my truth, it's my version of what happened. I think if Rob wrote his version of what happened, it would be a different book, and as it should be. But I didn't have any reservations because I felt that this was my honest portrayal.
It came across as such a loving tribute to every single human who crossed your path, except maybe that nurse who I kind of wanted
right?
I wanted to have words with that nurse, just so you know. I was very angry on your behalf.
Yeah, it was an early writing coach who said to me, you're writing a love story, and I was like, what? Yeah. And that's actually how it starts, by saying this is a love story.
It is. I mean, that's how I experienced it entirely. And I'm so grateful that Sher Tukva got to, as you put it, be a character in this love story, and we are certainly profoundly in love with you, Jesse, and your whole family, and so grateful to have been, part of the framing of any of the experiences there, and for me personally and professionally, mostly personally, to know you, to have your friendship, to have had a front row seat to Dahlia in life with all of her larger-than-life joy and sweetness, and to be able to read this book and have a record to hold on to all of it is such a gift that's going to keep on giving for me, and I know for all of us. So with that, we're so incredibly grateful to you for all that you've given us.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I know Rabbi Lisa has some, what's that? Yeah, unless there's anything you'd like to add at this point.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much.
And thank you, Rob, for being here.
First, I want to say if today brought up any thoughts or feelings, responses that would be helpful for you to discuss further, or might be helpful helpful for us as a synagogue to look into, please, please feel free to contact any one of us, Hollis, myself, Danny, Chris, and don't keep thoughts that are either very, very positive or very, very negative to yourselves. Many, many thanks to those at Temple Shir Tikva who helped put this very beautiful and unique program together. To Leah for communicating and coordinating everything. To Marilyn and Steve and the Adult Education Committee, to Chris and Scott and those on TST's Mental Health Initiative, for all of you for embracing the idea and collaborating in the best possible ways. To Beth Greenberg, who's thoughtful always, an energetic spirit gave this evening shape, creativity, and beauty. And to you, Cantor Hollis, for your wonderful idea that turned into a vision, that turned into a program. We are grateful to you.
Thank you.
Jesse, we thank you and your family. What a gift it is to know you, to read your book, to converse with you, and to share ideas. This past week, we started reading from the 4th book of the Torah, the book of Numbers, in Hebrew Bamidbar, known as In the Wilderness. It seems ironic that at the very same time we are reading about the children of Israel wandering in the wilderness for 40 years, we are also on the edge of observing Shavuot next week, and with it, the great celebration of the revelation at Sinai. What is the connection between Bamidbar, the experience of the children of Israel in the wilderness, and the giving of the Torah at Mount Sinai? The rabbis point out that Bamidbar, the word, actually contains the Hebrew word davar, which means word. They suggest Bamidbar means that sacred words of Jewish teaching and learning have their roots in the wilderness. Wise and sacred words emanate from the most unlikely places, even unwelcome places, such as dry, seemingly lifeless, barren wilderness. The greatest revelation in Jewish life took place on a modest-sized mountain, really a hill, in an empty, uninhabitable land. For us here tonight, Jesse, the metaphor is easily transferable and offers a powerful message against despair. Life and hope spring from the most unlikely places. Inspiration comes from places in ourselves that we don't even realize exist, and touch others through channels and pathways that we will never know. Jesse, from the depths of your own suffering, from the wilderness of your family's experience with the devastating loss of your Dahlia, you have cultivated words of love and healing. At a time of profound darkness, like the darkness we are told enshrouded Sinai, the moment before the revelation, you created light and you forged faith and hope. Through this beautiful book, Breathtaking, your words shine light to all of us who suffer and bring a well of consolation to those who need a hand in finding their way back to life's path. W.H. Auden wrote, "In the deserts of the heart, let the healing fountain start." With your words, you have helped us all move from those moments we all have in the deserts of the heart to the healing fountain of renewal and promise. And most of all, you have shown us that the healing fountain starts when we realize that we are not alone. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. That was beautiful. Are we going to do a hug? Isn't this the hugging time?
Yes.
Thank you.
Always hugging time.
And thank you all for being here tonight. And thank you online for being here tonight. I feel so fortunate to have been in this room with you, with all of you tonight. And I hope that you carry these beautiful messages with you home.
Thank you, Rabbi Lisa. I want to say that there is a podcast that you should all be listening to, right? And that we have books for people to sign or purchase this evening as well. So there's a little reception out there, so you can greet Jessie and make sure you have a copy of her book if you did not quite get one yet. Yes, a purple pen, even better. Thank you all. Thank you, Jessie.